Today's guest joined the Marines at 19, from serving his country to scaling businesses and mentoring veterans. Dave's journey is anything but ordinary.
If you can get somebody to laugh and to cry in the same setting, you've got their attention and you have the capacity to help them take a direction in their life that they've never taken before.
He's helping others find purpose, create impact, and take the leap they've been avoiding.
Everything that you need to learn to take the next step, delaying the inevitable. Ask for help, take that step, and just go.
In this episode, he breaks down the real difference between networking and selling, and how he's turning veteran grit into legacy.
So networking is not about getting the next invoice or the next sale. Networking is about unlocking infinite opportunities in every person that you meet.
This is Dave Burlin.
The adventure today for the Vegas Voices podcast takes us to a place called Nevada Partners, and we're here in an amazing library geared towards entrepreneur. I'm gonna let my guest Dave give us a bit of context on where we are and why we are here.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on. It's a honor and pleasure to be here. But you came to me, so it's kind of both ways, so I love that.
That's the point, Dave. We're going everywhere.
Yeah,
right?
Love it.
We're giving voice to Vegas in all sorts of places. There's going to be undisclosed places, dark city, light. Yeah. We're going to be in all layers of the city. Yeah. So that's the whole plan.
Well, you're right here then at the epicenter of what I say everyone that's in Nevada and Las Vegas needs to know what's happening here at Nevada Partners. So the backdrop today is here in the incubator for entrepreneurship. And this is the Veteran Entrepreneur Library that we ended up launching last year. We launched it July 11th of 2024, and it was part of a series of events that I call Freedom Week, which was a week to celebrate and promote veteran entrepreneurship. And that was actually done to catalyze the conversation to talk about Global Entrepreneurship Week later in the year. That was last November. So this is some people had donated the work behind framing out the library here. And during that week, we had people show up with more than 250, 300 books, that we put on the shelves. And since that time, a lot of the events that have happened here have all been to catalyze initiatives and movements that are going on in the community. So more and more people bring more and more books. I'll be really honest, there's not a super formal process to like checking the books in, checking the books out. I have my own little private collection up top, probably out of frame, but the books are really just a physical place where people can come and celebrate entrepreneurship, answer some of those curious questions of what they could be learning. And there's always different events going on here at the space where there's speakers, there's workshops, there's all different things going on. Seven days, not 7 days a week always, but there's events on Saturdays. There's events every day of the week for different parts of Nevada Partners and the things that are going on here.
I love it, and thank you for giving us that context, because my mission with the show is finding places like this in Las Vegas. I had no idea where we were coming in today. I just had a conceptual word about it, and it's just amazing to see that there's these type of things here, right? And especially for you, that you focus on veterans. Veterans are so important because they serve our nation, right? So from Marine Corps veteran yourself to community leader, entrepreneur, let's start by sharing a little bit of your background on how you found your calling currently right now in business, and from veteran to business to giving veterans opportunity. It's just amazing.
No, I love that. It's a funny story. It's a long one, but I can condense it down, right? One of my good mentors, he's had a book somewhere on this. He always said, have a 5-minute, a 15-minute, and a 50-minute keynote in your back pocket. So we'll go with the 50-minute version. I'm kidding.
That's
kidding.
50 or 15?
No, yeah, right. But in short, this is a funny thing, and depending on when everything gets released, but like as of today's date, we're in March, right? Beginning of March. I'm in boot camp right now. 25 years ago. 25 years ago, I was 19 years old, and I was in boot camp for the Marine Corps. I talked to a recruiter literally on a Saturday, and by the next Monday, like not 2 days later, but by just not like 8 days later, I was on my first plane ride ever, and I was in the Marine Corps. And it was a fascinating experience, but I didn't even think ahead of like getting out of the military or anything like that. So I served from 2000 to the end of 2003, got out a little early, and then I actually came home. Home then was Oklahoma. And one of the first jobs that I got out of the Marine Corps was I worked at Thunderbird Youth Academy. It was a boot camp for at-risk youth. It was all 16 to 18-year-old high school dropouts. And I did that for 7 years. For 7 years, I put on a different uniform, and I was, speaking into the lives of kids that were just like me. I was very much at-risk youth. I used to fight a lot, and I thought by going into the Marine Corps, I'd either get really good at fighting, or maybe I would slow my roll a little bit.
Probably both.
A little bit of both. And then, as I worked at the youth academy, the challenge there is you don't make a lot of money working for the state, or at least back then you didn't. It's like all the good work, it's kind of like teachers and stuff, right? You don't get paid well. I actually worked a whole full-time job on top of that, as an electrician. So I got to go run the whole academy on the weekends. I did my 40 hours in 3 days, 2 16s and an 8. And then I worked the other 4 10s as an electrician.
Let me reflect with this, because I see a common thread. You're always in it for service.
Absolutely.
Where did that come from?
If I'm being really honest, for the longest time, it came out of guilt and shame. A lot of it came from me being at-risk youth. I was not a very good person. And I think that the first time that I was not only acknowledged as a United States Marine, but also respected for it, I think that also bred into me that service is always the way to go. So I always just continued that service in one form or fashion. But yeah, as I did the youth academy for 7 years, I really hit this ceiling where I didn't know that I could be very much more effective there. I hit that ceiling in 7 years, and I ended up leaving that whole industry completely and became a wedding DJ, which is totally counterintuitive to being in the Marine Corps. You learn all the traits from those logistical types of organizations on how well they do transfer over. But of course, just by being a wedding DJ, it's not like I DJ'd 5 or 6 weddings a year. I started doing 50. Ultimately, I got up to the point where I did almost 100, but I've done 750 weddings all across the United States. In that, I also scaled a business that I worked for in that industry, all across Tulsa, Dallas, Kansas City, Denver, Indianapolis. And then ultimately, when I came to Vegas, I came here with no intentions of being in the wedding industry at all. I'd actually taken a different role out here. And the first person I met at a brunch he said he was trying to grow his DJ business. And I was like, well, I can't not do that in Vegas, because Vegas is sort of the Megatron of weddings. So I got back into that 2019, made it through pandemic, and then kicked up the DJ career again until just this last year.
I remember that, but that also led you to coaching and consulting, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then eventually, also, I think you forgot to mention, because I did research you pretty extensively, about your efforts for volunteering and on Bunker Labs, which helps the entrepreneurs. I think we missed that part. There somewhere.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. And sometimes I forget all the.
You don't forget about. I mean, there's always been that's why I'm mentioning the thread of service. There's always that feeling that you get when you're around Dave, that he is in service. He's there. It's never in it for him. It's in what can he do for you? What can he do for veterans, which is your most important vacancy, and what can he do for the community? So that's the common thread, right?
Yeah.
And I remember that's how I met you you were doing this organization that helps veterans start their businesses, or if they started the business, orient them. So can you go a little bit into that?
There's a funny story there, and I think it's relevant to that. The fact that we're sitting here in the Veteran Entrepreneur Library. As I mentioned, this was launched last year during Freedom Week. Freedom Week, I created the week after 4th of July to celebrate veteran entrepreneurship. I had actually done this back in Oklahoma. And this is a really funny story about Bunker Labs. So back in 2016, there was a new program that was going around the country called Bunker Labs. And their mission was to help veterans and their spouses start and grow businesses. I got connected to the person that was coming to speak at this event. And in true fashion, right, I'm like, I want to show off to this guy that Tulsa, Oklahoma knows what they're doing in the world of entrepreneurship. So I actually created a whole series of events, like 4 or 5, called Freedom Week there. This guy came and talked about the mission of Bunker Labs, said they were going to different communities around the country to figure out where they're going to set the first incubators. Tulsa didn't get selected, but it's so funny because that was in 2016. I had no idea that I'd be moving to Las Vegas. In fact, we didn't set that idea until the next year. But when we came here to Las Vegas, one of the first people I met was interested in getting Bunker Labs set up here. So I actually helped launch the first chapter for Bunker Labs in Las Vegas back in 2019. We had our first meeting in October of 2019. We had our second meeting in February of 2020. And I remember as we're packing up the car, it's like, all right, we'll see you guys next month. Well, then COVID happened. So I was actually part of the very first chapter, but we also had to figure out how to navigate through starting this very much in-person organization based on events, based on physical cohorts where we all meet up at WeWork. And how do we navigate that through the pandemic? So I helped launch some of the first virtual online cohorts. And then once we were able to start here, I just never looked back. So continued to work with Bunker Labs for a couple of years. We had several people come through multiple cohorts. And then since then, that organization has been sort of absorbed by another veteran organization. I switched over. I volunteered for another veteran program called Vets in Tech. Vets in Tech was also part of the big team that helped Freedom Week last year. And due to the efforts of Global Entrepreneurship Week, like they're all partnered, and that's where we're going to do even bigger initiatives for Freedom Week this year, where we're possibly launching it in 2 to 3 other cities. And we'll have more veteran entrepreneur libraries popping up across the country.
That's amazing. Diving a little deeper into that, do you find that veterans have a higher entrepreneurial spirit, or do they have? Is it easier for a veteran to start a business because of the knowledge they have from the military? Yeah. And how do you see that now that you've helped so many of these guys?
Yeah, and this is fun because I actually, during that Freedom Week in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I created a video, and I'll share that with you. I'm going to echo what Derek said in that video, because it's something that I've taken with me through every organization that I've been a part of that has to do with Veteran Sense. Veterans have the skills to be successful in the startup community. Okay. We have grit. We have organization skills. We have vision. Like, a lot of people don't understand that small business is great, but one thing that most veterans have experienced is a worldwide responsibility, and that generally adds depth to how they look at everything. Right? It's like, it's hard to really look at a small business and how it affects this block or this small community without understanding how it actually plays into the greater mechanics of the world. So that vision alone is something that cannot be ignored, but put in the right context, under the right guidance, under the right mentorship, everything is possible. And what we found is it's not just the skills that they have, it's the network. I have 6,000 people on LinkedIn, true connections, about 5,000 of them. I think we all went through that spurt where we just kind of added anybody and everybody. But for the most part, 80% of the people that I know are real people, but you can see where I know veterans all across the United States. And I could make a phone call, and with the right resources, I could, introduce other people to business there, or I can get dropped and start something up, because I immediately have connections and resources all across the country just on that common thread that we're...
Membership has its privileges.
It does.
Wow. All right, man. Let's go a little bit into your mindset, the mindset part of Dave, and the things that encompass that. I know you're a total fan of books. You connect with people with books.
Yeah.
We have one of your main mentors, John Acuff. I know you're a big Disney fan in the culture type of thing, in the business culture. Zappos, Simon Sinek. What are the core principles that you take from these influences, and which ones have impacted most in your leadership style?
Yeah, man, I could literally talk just about books forever. It's my favorite thing. And it's funny because I have the stack of books here, but every time I go out and I'm working somewhere remote, I'll put a few books out on the table and I'll change up and just put different ones on top just to see if people start conversation. A lot of times they'll see a book and say, oh my gosh, I love that book.
That's one of your networking tricks, right?
It is. But, it's again, and this comes from the idea that, if you were wearing a Golden Knights jersey, I was wearing a Golden Knights jersey, and we were in a completely different city, we would probably be drawn to each other to connect.
That's true.
It's funny because if we're in this city, here in Vegas, and you're wearing a opposing jersey, you and I are friends. We've known each other for a long time. We could probably go Rogan on this and talk for 5 hours and still not scratch the surface of half of it. But if you were wearing an opposing jersey, I could walk right by you and not say a word, and we could never connect. I say there's no jerseys for the books that we read because no one has any idea the books that are on our shelves. So with that being said, where the books really became powerful for me was when I worked at that DJ company. I'll be honest, I was 30 years old when I started working there. That was the first book I ever really read. The owner had a bounty, if you will. He said, hey, one of our things here is we read books as a company, and because we always want to get better. And if you have a problem with that, you probably can't work here. And I was like, okay, like, whatever. And he's like, so the first book that you need to read is called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And if you read it and write a page on it, I'll pay you $100. And I was like, I'll take your $100.
That's a cool incentive.
It's a cool incentive. But actually, it was literally like, I was so short-minded. I was like, I'll take your $100. Little did I know what was in that book. And little did Jason Bailey, the owner of DJ Connection, little did he know that by paying me that $100, that I would eventually, in time, scale his operation that had dominated Oklahoma for 10 years into Dallas, Kansas City, Denver, Indianapolis, all across the United States. That's now the largest privately held wedding entertainment company in the United States. And one of the core values that I help them come up with is pursue growth and learning. So they have a library and a bookshelf, and they constantly read all the time. And at the time I read that, and then I just got addicted. I started reading everything. The owner took me to, if you're familiar with, Dave Ramsey, a lot of people know Dave Ramsey for, Total Money Makeover. A lot of people don't know that he has a whole other brand called Entree Leadership. And this is a really fun story because you mentioned Simon Sinek, you mentioned John Acuff. Back when that started, Simon Sinek was hot at the time with Start With Why. He was the first guest on the Entree Leadership podcast, and John Acuff was the host. And it was horrible. Like, it was just, this is years ago when podcasts were first kind of like everyone thought they had to have it, but people weren't really great at podcasting. I say it was horrible. It was just Simon would answer a question with just all the infinite wisdom and knowledge of Simon Sinek. And John Acuff is just like, okay, next question, and it was just so rigid. There was a one-day conference where they took all these different speakers. John was on Dave's team at the time, and I can even tell you the date. It was April 19th, 2013. And I know that for two reasons. One, it was in Oklahoma City, which it happened to be the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. And they took a moment of silence for that, which respectfully they should. But it was also the first time I saw John Acuff speak. He was talking about his book at the time called Start. And something really profound happened that day. I laughed so hard at a keynote presentation because Johnny Cuff is one of the funniest people I know.
Oh.
But I also was like slow thug tear mascara crying in the back because some of the stuff that he said hit me so hard. I was just like, one, I want to be this guy's friend. And I also learned a very valuable lesson that day. If you can get somebody to laugh and to cry in the same sitting, you've got their attention and you have the capacity to help them take a direction in their life that they've never taken before. So fast forward, I bought his book. I start listening to his book. I find out there's this whole community of people that are also part of his book club. And I became part of his, he had this little 24-day challenge and it was so vague. It was like, hey, 24 days, bring a machete, drop your email right here. And it's like, what? I signed up for it and it was the START experiment. This is for people that are ready to start a business, live an epic life, just do it, right? Start. And on day 17 of this little challenge, I slowly learned that there was an online community, but there was a local community in Tulsa of people that did a little practice out of the book. And where most people were checking in on this app at 5 a.m., there was a group of people right there in my hometown that were meeting for breakfast at 5 a.m. So I became friends with the group. And on day 17, the challenge was write a Time magazine article from the future as if you've already accomplished the big thing. And I did that. And the thing that I wanted to do was do a TED Talk.
Oh.
And I just seen my first TED Talk in Kansas City, like on TV. I knew that like whatever this was, like this is what I'm supposed to do. And the thing that I wanted to talk about was veteran transition. I wanted to share my story on that platform. So in 2013, I wrote this Time magazine article from the future, from 2030. And I wrote it as if I had already accomplished that goal. And I wrote it in the past tense of it was just 10 years later in 2023 that Dave did his first TED Talk. And wouldn't you know it, it was actually only 14 months later from the time that I wrote that article that not only did I do the TEDx talk, that was my first public talk ever. And then ever since then, since I talked about veteran entrepreneurship, it's just always put me in cool rooms with the right people. When I reached out to Simon Sinek's team to see if I could quote him in my TED Talk, they actually contacted me and helped me be a part of some programs that they were working on to help facilitate why discovery courses for veterans. And it's really just been this fun, crazy, I tell people my life is like a Forrest Gump side quest on psychedelics.
I can see that.
Roll with the punches.
And I see, I wanted to dive deeper because I see a common thread. You just dive into one thing. Like, it's decisive, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. What you dive into is within 48 hours, decisive, and now. From the military to the challenges you do to the decisions you take,
Yeah.
It's just, where does that come from? I'm so fascinated. That's an aspect that I'm just seeing about you.
Well,
at the moment.
You just actually added an element to it that I'd never thought of before. I've told that story about joining the military in 8 days 100 times. But I never, until you just said that, I never realized that it probably started there. But I'll be honest, again, when I go back to the guilt and shame and all that stuff, a lot of times it was really out of just being in a survival instinct mindset. You know, I grew up in a really at-risk environment where everything was sort of predicated and based on survival. It is very decisive when I go, and I do pick the path that I see the most impact and the most influence and the most income. Like, I see those things and I make my decisions based off of that. And yeah, normally when I do, I go hard into it. The wedding thing was, it was the first tour that I took of their office and their operation that made me say, yeah, I don't know what this is, but I feel like I'm supposed to be here. The energy was right. There's just all this fun stuff going on, but it was also this big business machine at the time. And when I see it, I jump on. I've danced through a couple of different industries, in that same manner where something makes sense. And I end up running it to the top or like somewhere in the top of that sort of industry or realm. And I just stay with it. I see the opportunity to learn from it. I see the opportunity to grow. And sometimes I'm just like, I think we're doing this. Let's go.
Well, thank you. And thank you for doing it for us too. And out of your mindset, I think we missed on a part. You have a keynote talk about networking.
Yeah.
And you use your boombox.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. And I can see now, as you tell me your story, that a lot of those elements play into that.
Yeah.
As I'm speaking about it, our public doesn't know what I'm referring to, so I'd like you to tell us the cliff notes of that talk and where did it come from out of all these elements that you've taught us so far about your life.
Like most things, the idea of why networking was really born, again, out of another survival season.
Okay.
One of the books you'd mentioned was Tony Hsieh's book.
Okay.
When we were I was running the DJ business. We'd opened up Dallas, Kansas City. We started to suffer this interesting thing. And by the way, we never ruined anyone's wedding. Let me be very clear about that. But as I went back to Oklahoma and started running the office and sales, we started to notice a little bit of a decrease in the workflow or just the overall customer service in the other cities. The real of it was kind of predicated on my energy. I was driving around listening to Tony Hsieh's book about how he created Zappos. And what was fascinating to me was the core values part of that.
Delivering happiness,
Delivering happiness, yeah. The core values piece really grabbed me because it's almost, we had core values in the Marine Corps, but at the time you couldn't really see how any of that stuff would cross over into business. It wasn't a hot topic yet. But when I heard, first of all, I love the fact that Tony built his original core values. I don't know if most people have read the book, were peace, love, unity, respect, which are the core values of the rave culture. He evolved those into the 10 core values that most people know today. But when I learned that you could do that, I was reading his book. I pitched it to the owner. He said he's very much an old school business guy. He's like, dude, that doesn't move the needle. And then when we all read Tony's book and learned that Amazon sold for $1.2 billion, well, companies sell for all the time and they normally get chopped into bits. When Amazon acquired Zappos, they didn't change anything. They made it clear they were acquiring the core values. So once we incorporated core values into the DJ business, it took off like crazy. So I came out here in 2015, cause I went to EDC, cause old school rave did, right? Went to EDC. And when my ex-wife and I, at the time we were married, we took a tour of Zappos because we were in town. And I'll never forget, she said, I want to work here. And I was like, wait, what? Like, we're building this whole life and empire back in Oklahoma. She's like, I don't know, I want to work here. Well, I wanted to work there too, but I was like, there's no way. And I even told her, I said, it's easier to get into Harvard than it is to get a job at Zappos, which at the time it was. And she's like, yeah, but you've done the manifesting stuff before. I bet you could figure it out. So, all right, game on. I went home. I shot a video. I have to add this part. Out of a book called Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff, I used the framework that he outlines in that book to write the script for Zappos Family or Bust. Created a 10-minute video. And at the time, you had to supply video before anyone could be considered. So for 2.5 years, everybody we met, we showed this video to. I was building relationships with the people at Zappos from back in Oklahoma. We came back in 2016, took another tour. This time people know us and we were kind of like, hey, yeah, we're the guys from the video. Still no openings. And then later in 2017, we were actually both offered roles to come back and work at Zappos. I was taking care of everything back home. So I ended up staying home. I gave up my role so she could come out here, get started, and meanwhile, I was back home. Now, this isn't a slam on my ex-wife. In that gap, she decided she didn't want to be married anymore, and so I was faced with this is really challenging for anyone that's been an entrepreneur, is like your whole identity is wrapped up in it. My whole identity had been wrapped up in coming to work for Zappos and talking about core values. The first time that somebody asked me to speak in December of 2018, I don't know if I can cuss on the show. I'm not going to, but I was like, what the F do you want me to talk about? Because and then this is what somebody told me. They said, you're really good at building relationships. Can you talk about that? So in that moment, I sat on it. I was like, well, I have to call it something. And if I'm going to do this, this is what I'm going to do. Same thing. I know whatever I come up with, this is going to be the thing. And it was so simple because I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek. I was like, can I just put why in front of networking and call it why networking? So that's what I did. So the first conversation was born out of survival to really start to understand how do you build authentic relationships. Since that time, I was able to host my first big event for it before I left Oklahoma. Then when I did come here, I tested myself just to see. In the first year that I was here, I had been here 11 months. And I was like, let me host my first event and see what happens. And 50 people paid and came. And I was like, okay, this works. But every time I did it, I learned a little bit more. That happened to be in October of 2019. And of course, shortly after that was COVID. And so many people in the coaching and speaking space, as soon as COVID and the pandemic started, everyone was immediately tested. Does what I have to offer the world make sense or hold water in this new life called pandemic? And what's beautiful about that is I was able to do virtual presentations almost every day, in some way, shape, or form. When Clubhouse got really big, I shaped up, and it helped me form what that real conversation and talk was. And we met at WeWork. It's funny because there was nights that I was at WeWork until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, just trying to figure this out like a mad scientist on whiteboards. And then I realized, cause what the frustration of that is that there's all these people that go to networking events and just get frustrated because they just get sold to. And I was trying to figure out what that was. And it's probably a much deeper conversation, but the simple discovery was, and I challenge everyone to look for the problem that you're trying to solve. It might be in the dictionary. The dictionary definition of prospecting versus networking is not the same thing. Right? So networking is not about getting the next invoice or the next sale. Networking is about unlocking infinite opportunities in every person that you meet.
So you went to first principles and found the definition that works.
Yep. Well, I found that the definition of prospecting is, moving somebody through a sales process.
Correct.
And then networking is creating or building, maintaining relationships. I'm like, somehow it gets blended, and I understand how it does. And it normally starts as soon as somebody says, what do you do? People are they naturally start pitching. And if they see any kind of interest at all, you're now a number, and well, now I've got to set them up for a little discovery call or whatever it is. And it's to me, whole story about that book, Do Over by John Acuff. I built a relationship with John when he left Dave Ramsey. He waited about a year before that book came out. When he did the book tour, he asked me if I would help him with the book tour when he came through Tulsa. Randomly, we picked him up in a DeLorean.
Wow.
just to be memorable and have fun with it. And that day, I actually bought 3 copies of the book. I kept this one. I gave one away at the event, but one, I just tagged somebody and I said, hey, does anybody know a veteran? Because I think this book will really help them in their transition from service to civilian life. And somebody I do know tagged somebody I don't. And I sent them a copy of that book. And I can't even tell you what has created out of that random act of trying to build a relationship, to the point that it got to somebody who then eventually ran a really big veteran nonprofit down in Houston, Texas. And we actually did the first veteran post-traumatic growth library in Houston, Texas 7 or 8 years ago. But that relationship turned into the point where I was actually going to be a groomsman in his wedding. And it has nothing to do with trying to get him to be a coaching client. It has nothing to do with, trying to sell him any of the services or, any of the things that I do. That was just one of those things where because of that, he's referred me to big referral partners, and just life has happened, business has happened, all that stuff happens, but it doesn't if we ruin the relationship before it even has the opportunity to breathe.
Little sparks, kind of like getting paid $100 to read Think and Grow Rich, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, I have to pay homage to this because my coach now is a guy, David Meltzer. And this is one of the funniest things in the world. A friend introduced me to David. David's introduced me to a whole world of some of the most incredible people. And this is the funny thing. Just this year on January 11th, if you're an angel numbers person, January 11th, 111, David Meltzer, whose birthday is also on 111, was just named the chairman of the board for the Napoleon Hill Institute.
Oh, wow.
And he's going to introduce me to J.B. Hill, who is the surviving grandson of Napoleon Hill, who's a Marine Corps veteran, and they're looking at doing some type of a specific track for veterans and the Napoleon Hill Foundation.
Fantastic. Yeah, and we'd love to have Dave later in the show. Maybe you can introduce us to him.
Absolutely.
Be amazing. Cool, man. So with all that, I want to segue a little bit from you to others you've helped, because I know you've coached a lot of people, you've inspired a lot of people. Is there a standout success story from your work with any small businesses or any veteran? And on the flip side, what has been your most challenging lesson learned along the way?
Yeah. There's one that I'm really, this is one that I'm very excited about, and it's veteran adjacent, right? There's a little bit of veteran play here, but this is one of the more fascinating things that I've seen in all the time, because I saw this one from start to finish. There's a guy, he come from a military family. He did go to officer candidate school, but he had type 1 or type 2 diabetes, and he was medically discharged. His brother was a Marine. His dad was like one of the Marines on the recruiting poster of like downtown New York City way back in like the 60s or something.
Wow.
So hardcore Marine Corps family. They own restaurants back in Oklahoma. Phenomenal chain of restaurants. It's privately held. Andolini's, and Mike Bausch is somebody who I became a fan of their work back in Oklahoma when I was growing the DJ business. We had collided at a wedding, and then I learned more about his operation. He had 5 or 6 stores at the time. He's got 11 restaurants now. When I say he has 11 restaurants, he's home every night for dinner. And the only way you can live a life like that is you have to have systems. Like, they have the most insane restaurant systems I've ever seen. I started to come to Pizza Expo with him out here. I had no idea that he stretched past the world of just Oklahoma. But over the last 5 years, actually, this will be the 5th Pizza Expo that I'm going to this year. I've been going with this guy, and every time he speaks, there's 50 people lined up ready to ask more questions or buy the book or do the thing. And for a couple years, I'm like, dude, like, people want more. Let's give it. I'd worked for big coaching and consulting people. Like, it's not that hard. Let's put a community together, do all these things. And in the last couple of years, he put all that together. In 2023, we launched we did just a group coaching thing. 50 people signed up. It was just calls on Mondays. In November of 2023, we launched a very basic beta course, 6-figure launch. And then, over the last year, we've got up over $750,000 in sales. And then at Pizza Expo this year, it's projected to go blast way past the $1 million mark in a total of 14 months. That's been the most fascinating one to me, because he's also somebody that just, when presented with the idea of it, he made decisions. He made decisions quickly, which restaurant people make decisions very quickly, as do people from military families. And those decisions were learned from, like, you learn, and then he pivoted. He did what people told him to do. He went to the experts and they said, do this. He did that, and it's completely worked. We have 200 people that are in that container now. It's a mastermind group of independent restaurant owners all over the world, not just pizza. And I think that's one of the first, like, cause when I came on with the DJ business, like they'd been in business for 10 years. Mike has also been in business all this time, but not in that world of it. So by watching him and riding shotgun through this whole process, it's also helped me understand what are some of the talents and skills that I can help a community of people do, whether it be veterans or whatever. And that's what I've been narrowing focus on, because even though he's about to hockey stick and go to the next level, we had the very candid conversation of, okay, cool. You go do that. Now it's my turn to step into my power, if you will, or step into what I can really bring value to. And that's where I've made that step across. The podcast that I've recently launched that you were a guest on is kind of the segue for that, to start building that audience and start building out some of these different ideas. And then now I'm going much more into the niche of why networking, and how to teach people how they can also build community.
With that, a shout out to the Pursue Vegas podcast, which will be out soon. I was a guest on it. It was pretty dope. We'll put it out on the channel too. So with that, let's go into the rapid fire.
Yeah, I'm down. Let's go.
You're down? Okay, cool. Give me your best military inspired leadership tip.
I don't know that this is necessarily leader, like from the military, but this is the best one. It crosses more than just leadership. Ask more questions, read less minds. So many people think that leadership is giving commands. I believe that leadership is about fear, and I'll explain. The reason why I tend to excel and do a really good job is because I'm afraid that if I do a bad job, I won't be loved, I won't be respected, I won't be acknowledged. My goal as a leader is to take that same fear and pass it on to the next person, so they know and understand what's at stake, so they make the decisions that make sure that never happened. Right? Not in a bad way, like in a good way. Like there's all these things that could go wrong. If I just tell people to do something, they won't understand what the consequences are. But if I ask the right questions, that'll bring that awareness to them. So if you ask more questions and read less minds, you'll generally get people a lot further.
So you ask those questions to guide them to get that fear.
To help them guide themselves.
Right.
To that realization.
But then you have to teach them how to transmute it too, because not everybody operates greatly out of fear.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. But okay, let's go to another rapid fire. One word that describes your mission.
Community. My mission is to connect the people of this city and show the world who we really are. And the vision that goes with that is that, we don't have to change the world. I feel like that was what my responsibility was for so long. It's not. We don't have to change the world. We just have to change the way the world looks at Las Vegas, and the world starts to shape and change around that.
Hence why you're a Vegas voice. Give me I know this is going to be a hard one for you. Favorite book that you recommend?
Well, there's always a couple of books. I always do like One Life, One Business. For life, there's a great book called The Alchemist. You may have seen it. I have a shirt that says The Alchemist on it. It's one of those magical books that a lot of times when people see it, it's just a different group of awareness that people have who've read it and found their path, their personal legend, and if they're living into that or not. So I always recommend The Alchemist. As far as business goes, I've really become a strong fan of Hermosi. I've been to their workshop. I've watched all their stuff. I know people who work for them, and there's so many influencers and people out there that it's, a lot of times people aren't who they say they are. They're different on stage versus off stage. I'll say this first. They're the Bruce Lee of business in everything that I've ever experienced. And I've got to meet some pretty cool people. They're the realest deal that I've found. And his book, $100 Million Offers, is just the most simple, clarity that so many people overlook. So many people want to skirt around actually creating an offer and putting that offer in front of people. And I think it's probably the most practical business book that I've read in a long time.
You know what? I agree with that. I'm in marketing, and if a client doesn't come to me with a good offer, I dismiss him right off the bat, because 90% of the pool isn't the offer. So that's a good one. I love it. And we want to have Alex soon on our podcast. We will.
This is a manifesting podcast, because there's all kinds of people I want to have on my show, and he's one of them.
Yeah, man. You'll see. We're going places. We're finding the voices. Dave, where are you headed next?
Next, there's three. There's always, when I say there's a lot of things always, I generally keep it to three, and sometimes people don't understand how all those things blur together. Right now, the biggest focus for me is the Pursue Vegas podcast, because that's the opportunity for me to amplify the mission that I'm here to create, to keep people on the path of growing this community, unlocking new relationships. And with that, the two big things that we have this year is we're doing Freedom Week again in July, and then Global Entrepreneurship Week again in November. And as the state coordinator for Global Entrepreneurship Week, and I partnered them with Vets and Tech for Freedom Week, it's really the best way to bring this community together under a direction that I can also bring it under the Pursue Vegas podcast and the Pursue Vegas podcast network, to make sure that we really do a good job of highlighting all of these different segmentations of entrepreneurship in our city. So this year is all about not just building the community, but really amplifying the voices of that, which is why I reached out when I saw your show. And however we can do that together, let's make it that.
Thank you. I was honored to be in it. So, same thread. You still keep being in service. It is just commendable that you still, your life path is always centered around service and your community. And I admire and commend that. And that's kind of what we're doing here. But, I'm always a little more selfish, in the sense I'm always trying to make money. I'm a marketer at heart.
Yeah.
So a lot to learn from that.
Yeah.
A lot to learn from that. Dave, for entrepreneurs or veterans out there wanting to build momentum, what's the most crucial piece of advice you can give them now?
Yeah. You probably have already learned everything that you need to learn to take the next step. Everything you do to delay that is only delaying the inevitable. So ask for help, take that step, and just go.
Doesn't it have, it's like the saying, go as far as you can see, and when you get there, you'll see further. Don't you have to do that when you're in the military, when you're in combat? The only thing you can see is the next place that you're going to go and beach hit or shoot from, right? Yeah. Then you'll know there what you're going to be shooting, right? That's...
Well, yeah, and so many times, I've been there too. Sometimes people feel like they have to read the next book, or they need to go see another people's spirit. They need to have somebody else validate what they're thinking, where it's what you need to do. Just take action.
Cool, man. Where can people find out about you online, learn about your coaching and consulting, or get involved in any of these different initiatives that you spearhead?
Yeah, all the links for everything are always at davemeansbusiness.com.
Okay.
And then for the website more specific to the podcast, www.pursue.vegas. Those are the two spots. And then all my links to anywhere and everywhere I'm at are there.
Yeah, you can also Google him. We found a lot of information just by doing that. It's been inspiring hearing about your journey, your dedication to the veteran community, and your passion for bridging entrepreneurship in Las Vegas and beyond. Thank you for sharing your invite.
You got it, my friend.
And being a Vegas voice.
I love it.
Thanks, man.